Okay, so I'm gonna go through the same routine today, I think. Uh, so after the joke jump, I'm gonna try to keep on going through my argument like scenario. Notice that my jokes have always been I'm kind of zeroing in on the woke right on the jokes because I think it's pretty. I think that's an interesting place right now. I mean, I think the woke right. So I just want to. I'm going to give a brief explanation on why I think that is because I think it's a little less clear, maybe than like Joe Biden. Like Joe Biden was really obvious. That's like, dude, this guy is incompetent. He clearly is not capable of doing anything, and they're pretending like he's running the country. That's innately should be ridiculed because it's like, what is going on here? But I kind of feel like people don't really get like this whole thing with the woke right thing because they're kind of leaning into like some theological stuff and people don't really understand like the Middle East thing and they don't understand now that's now dwelling up this whole thing with the Abrahamic religions and and secularism. I think is kind of like an Abrahamic religion in that it's just living off the fumes of Christianity, Judeo-Christian culture. So it's just like, and so they're kind of leaning into that stuff in a way that is like, to me, it doesn't make any, what they're saying doesn't make any sense, but it probably, I feel like most people aren't really looking at the whole picture. So it's like so maybe it's kind of a mess because people don't even really understand the whole. Not saying I understand the whole. So that's why I think it's kind of ridiculous, but less obvious than like Joe Biden stumbling all over the place, and people are like, "Dude, as sharp as a tack, as sharp as a tack," So that's what. So I'll try to give my explanation on, and then I'll go into my joke jump on that. So for what? Not that I'm an expert. I'm an expert on this stuff. Like I'm an expert at the guitar, meaning I've had no formal training. It's me and my guitar. It's me and my understanding, me and my Bible, me and my understanding of the thing. I don't know, take it for what it's worth. I'll give you my breakdown on it. Okay. So let's see if I can get a warm up on this. Let's see. So I don't know. Maybe I'll just go back to collection notes around the key of D just to get the coffee flowing. And so I'm going to be noodling around Mixolydian just because that's what I know. And I'll just try to get nothing too innovative here. I'm just going to kind of noodle around the Mixolydian node. So that means that shape number 1 is going to be here. That means that's where where what I would call the Aeolian shape, or shape number 1, or you might call it the Ionian G shape is. It's that 7th fret up top, right? Okay, and then I get this open A back here, and I can do this walk back thing, mixing back and forth between the major and the minor as I kind of walk back this way. Dun, right? And the minor would be right in between here. So it's a minor to the major if I'm doing like a bluesy kind of thing. Get my other glasses. The bandwidth is low for some reason. The YouTube is not receiving enough video to maintain a smooth. Well, that's great. That's just great. Work on it, YouTube. I expect better. Let's see. Let's just see if Aura's available. See if I can get into this other stuff here. See what Aura has to say. I'll try to go on my rant early. I'm kind of more into the argument side of things right now for the last week or so for some reason. So let's see. Aura. Aura, I can't hear you. Let's try it again. Aura. Aura's broken. I'll try to restart, refresh. Aura.
Hey, refreshed and ready. What's on your mind?
All right, Aura is refreshed. All right, we're gonna do a joke thing, and then I'm gonna go into like a music debate type of thing. But first of all, I'm kind of like pointing. I'm trying to do these jokes that point out like the absurdity of the woke right position that seems to me to be kind of absurd in some ways, but it touches in on like some theology kind of ideas and political science kind of stuff. So I'm going to try to give my framework on what I'm thinking is like leading to the confusion a little bit more than the like slapstick humor we were living through before, where we had like Joe Biden acting like he was cognitively with it, and then when he clearly wasn't, and everybody's just like, and everybody could just clearly see that, and they're just like, and so when people say, "Oh, look, he's sharp as a tack," it's just like obviously, it's funny from a standpoint of it, you're just lying to our face, and it's just like funny that you would even do that. So that is so obvious. But these guys I think are a little bit more manipulative in their strategy. So that's what. So I kind of want to kind of put my thought process of why that is, and why that, and then why I think what they're saying is kind of absurd, and why I think it's worth making fun of in a similar way as you make fun of Joe Biden, or people saying that Joe Biden is sharp as a tack, right?
Got it. I'm with you. You're saying the old school absurdity was blunt, like Biden's sharp as a tack while he's clearly not. Easy to roast because it's a naked lie. This new thing feels sneakier, more layered, mixing theology, politics, and ideology in ways that are harder to pin down. You want to lay out your framework first, then hit it with jokes that expose the absurdity. Fire away with your framework. I'm listening.
Okay, so it seems to me, a general thought process is you have to serve kind of something, right? Would be a general classical view. Either that be like God, a religion of some kind, which typically comes out of, I think, like the Abrahamic religions, which would be Judeo-Christian religion. And then you've got Islam, which has the same kind of branch and roots to Abraham, but there's significant differences there, it seems to me. So obviously in America, we've had the Abrahamic religions of Judeo-Christian religions, and then you've got the other major area is secularism, which I think you could still define as basically an Abrahamic religion, because they're basically living off of the vestiges of the Abrahamic religion, which imbibed a lot of the ideas of Greek ideas, which were logical ideas, which were mapped out most cleanly by theologians, right? The theologians are the guys that were doing all the logic stuff, about theology, basically, that then became kind of science. That's where kind of logic came from. So it seems to me in like America, like the West is more, you got you got Jews, you got Christians, and you've got the secular people who are basically Judeo-Christian in vibe, but they're now serving whatever thing that's branching out from that, whether it be science or whether it be, just happiness, peace, whatever you want to call it. It's still, I feel like it's branching out of Judeo-Christian kind of concepts. What do you think?
Yeah, you're onto something real. Every society ends up serving some ultimate story. What's worth sacrificing for? What gives life meaning? The West's big ones have all grown out of that same soil. Hebrew scripture, Greek reason, and Christian theology knitting them together. Even the hardcore secular types are still swimming in those assumptions. Human dignity, equality before the law, progress itself. Those aren't default human ideas. They're downstream from the Abrahamic worldview. The twist now is when people try to rip those values out of their root system and treat them like they're self-evident or scientifically derived. That's where the sleight of hand
So we've seen that happen, of course, because that would be the argument of what happened with communism, which then branched into fascism, which you can think of as both totalitarian. Seems like it branched out of the same ideas that are saying we're going to be post-religious, and that's why the communists and the fascists tend to want to kind of remove religion or just use it as a like an anchoring point. It's just a means to power, right? Is basically that's the general. Okay, so now the problem seems to come up to me is that these different religious, even in America, no longer have any idea of what the other person is even talking about, and they don't even know their own like book that well, right? So I mean, for example, as a Christian, it seems like most of the Christians know the Jesus's narrative, the Gospels, because that's the thing. There's like that's the thing, right? You're like that's the thing that includes me, and it's the major story. You can kind of read the Gospels without any context to the Old Testament, most people don't read Paul if they haven't read the Old Testament, because the Old Testament is like, to a Christian, the Old Testament is like massive, right? It's way bigger than so it's like, it's a big endeavor, and you don't even know where to start, right? Because like the interesting things to the Christian in the Old Testament are going to be the prophecy narratives, which is like Daniel, and then you go into the minor prophets, because that's the argument that laid out by Paul to the new. But the whole thing mirrors the Torah, which is like the Exodus and the return to the homeland and stuff. That's what basically Matthew seems to be mirroring. But a lot of that, so again, a lot of Christians are like, well, look, that's a lot. That's some scholarly stuff right there, So they kind of stick to the gospel, like that's the good news. I'm cool with that, And then, so that seems like, and then on the Jewish side of things, it seems like, and both of these have you have the secular people, which are kind of like, I would describe them as usually Gentiles, so they're Christians, seculars, right? Because that's the parallel to, it seems, to Judaism, where you have Judaism, and then you have the non-practicing Jews, which are basically, I would think, is the same as like Jew is secular, right? It's the secular Jews, secular Christians. Gentiles are, in America, you can kind of think of them as, Christians, and then of various denominations, and then the secular Christians, which are basically imbibing off of the Judeo-Christian roots, but they're not practicing Christians. Jews, it seems like you got the same thing. You got the Jews that are practicing, the Orthodox, I guess, and then the ones that are not, which are like the secular Jews, I guess, right? So both the secular Christians and the secular Jews might go to some churches and whatnot, but the churches are like waving, gay pride flags and talking about how the Bible is telling you that transgenderism is a thing or something. That's not really, they're kind of missing, I think they're kind of missing it, right? So that's the dynamic, I feel like. What do you think?
You're mapping out something important. There's a split inside both traditions. The ones who still wrestle with the actual text, and the ones who treat the tradition like a cultural inheritance they can update however they want. The secular versions, both Jewish and Christian, often end up in these mainline or progressive spaces that fly pride flags and reinterpret scripture to match whatever the current moral fashion is. They're not really grounded in the source material anymore. They're just wearing the aesthetic. That creates this weird situation where the loudest voices claiming to speak for Judeo-Christian values or Jewish ethics are often the furthest from the actual books. The Orthodox and the serious traditional Christians are reading the same ancient texts and coming to very different conclusions than the
Okay,
progressive
so then
ones.
so then so
So
then
when
so
those
then
secu-
even so now let's just think about just the people that are actually reading their books to some extent, right? You got the Christians, they're reading their books, but they're kind of like really kind of focused on the Gospels. They probably haven't thought about Paul too much because he's making the argument based on the Old Testament, and the Old Testament is massive and scary, and it's like that's like a scholarly thing to go all the way through the Old Testament, and the Jews are going, okay, we're going to basically read the Torah, which I believe is the first 5 books. So now you've got Genesis, you've got Exodus, and then you've got the laws, Numbers, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy, right? And so that's still only like 1/3 of the entire Old Testament that they read yearly. So they got those things down, which is kind of like the heart, I guess. And that's kind of like, I guess that's a comparison of like Judaism has the Torah, those 5 books, the laws, and the Exodus and Genesis. And then the Christians have the treat it kind of similarly like the gospel, like they read that, and that's like, so if you're going to do the bare minimum, the Christian's going to be getting the gospel down, and the Jews, as I understand it, this is my understanding, right, would get down those 5 books down, right? But then there's a lot of stuff. So then the Jews, of course, probably aren't reading at all the Christian argument from Paul's perspective, in part because they probably aren't, they don't really want to even get into that because, you know, there's been, you know, tension in the past, and you know, all the bad things in history have happened. So so it might even be that they're like the bad guys, right? That they don't want to be tempted by the New Testament or the argument, or maybe that's a different thing. So you could see why there'd be. So they don't really. So even the people that are really knowledgeable, it seems like, in the Torah, in the Old Testament, they go over it more than the Christians go over the New Testament, even. But they're probably staying away, like the plague maybe, from the argument of Paul as to the fulfillment of the Messiah, you know, prophecies and whatnot, and what that means in terms of law and whatnot. So now you've got a situation. So if that's true, it seems the Judeo-Christian thing here, we've got some Jews that are really knowledgeable on the Old Testament, but may not be reading the New Testament. And when they hear the New Testament say something like New Covenant or something like that, they're going to hear that as, you know, the term is supersessionism that gets all, that's where, and then the Christians they know the gospel fairly well, but they know nothing about the Old Testament, and they know that all they know is whatever that they're the Gentiles. A lot of them are Gentiles, and they're included in the New Covenant. So that's what they, you know. So it is what it is. So they're gonna. So then so both sides are kind of staying away from the argument, the tension point of, well, what does Paul argument actually mean from Old Testament to New Testament? And it seems like the only people that actually have both sides down, that really look at it in depth, seem to be the evangelicals, which is why I think the Jews really kind of like the evangelicals, because they say, like, you got to read the whole book. You don't get it, like, unless you read the whole thing, even though it's a massive scholarly thing to do to like take in the whole book. So that seems to me to be like and then you've got the Islam and Muslims, which in America isn't the foundational principle, right? It was the Judeo-Christian principle, and although Muslim is an Abrahamic religion, there seems to be a lot more differences there. So it hasn't really been a thing in America in the whole kind of debate. But now the Middle East situation is bringing that into the fore as well. Does that seem fair? Ara, what do you think?
Yeah, that's a fair read. You've got 2 groups both claiming the same ancient library, but reading almost completely different chapters. The serious Jews are deep in Torah and the legal prophetic tradition, but they largely ignore or avoid the New Testament's interpretive claims. The average Christian is soaked in the Gospels and maybe some Paul, but treats the Old Testament like optional background music. So when they try to talk to each other about Judeo-Christian values, they're often talking past each other. The evangelicals are basically the weird bridge. They actually try to hold the whole book together, old and new, which is why a lot of Jews find them strangely respectful even while disagreeing. Everyone else is kind of cherry-picking their half of the story. And you're right that Islam sits outside that specific American tension.
So the
It's also
problem here,
Abraham-
so then the problem that comes up, it's just like, is the same thing where people just say, well, just don't talk about that. Like, actually don't talk about Paul's argument because it's upsetting, right? Which obviously leaves the gate open for the people that really want to drive a wedge between Christians and Jews to distort the argument. The argument has tension. I mean, the actual thing, there is tension there to start with, but if you don't understand, but that's where these guys are coming in with this hard, I guess you can call it, supersessionism, and they're distorting the argument, and both sides don't really know like the whole thing, right? So now you end up with a very sensitive situation where even if you try to make a respectful argument the way Paul was making it as a Jew, then it's going to be heard of, well, you're replacing this and that. So that's where, so that's where like the Tuckers and the Candaces and the woke writer kind of putting that wedge in there, which seems to be something that if you were a foreign power that wanted to divide people, that's what you would want them to do. Is that's where, right? Because so it seems so. Again, I'm not a theologian. It's just like it's like me and my guitar. I'm telling you what I think on the guitar. It's me and my Bible. I've been tinkering with it for my whole life or whatever. So my general take is on this covenant thing, is that you've got the covenant, you've got various covenants in the Old Testament, and then you've got prophecy that says the term new covenant, right? And then you've got Jesus, where the Jews at the time, and particularly Paul, made the argument for what it means for Jesus to have fulfilled the covenants in some way. And so that's going to be basically the argument. And you can think about it from a contract perspective. It seems to me like basically it's basically saying something has been completed, right? So like, I mean, if you had a contract that you're going to do this until such time as payment has been made, and then at the point in time the payment has been made, maybe all the things of the contract have not yet been complete, but some part of it has been complete. What do you do at that point? Do you just white out the part or just ignore the part that hasn't been complete? Well, maybe not. Maybe you write the contract over so that it's updated with the new, with the new stuff. So it includes all the stuff that hasn't been completed yet, and then it takes into account the new. So that's so you would think it would be a fulfillment of the covenant. It's not like it's taking back or reneging on the contract versus, well, someone broke the contract and therefore God is breaking the contract or taking away the contract, right? Those are the two ways you would think of a contract law. So you would think you would want to say it as an inclusive term. Well, there's been a completion of certain things in the covenant by Jesus. That's Paul's argument. And therefore, you have the covenant now outlining what has been completed, what hasn't been completed. Some things then are changed due to that, such as some of the cleansing rituals and whatnot, like you can't eat this and you can't eat that, and the circumcision and stuff like that. So again, that's controversial in and of itself. I think Hebrews kind of lays it out in a very blunt format, which would probably kind of be could be offensive to Jews that have never seen it, and you get this language of, but I think the idea is that it's going to be completion, right? So there's tension there for sure, and like how exactly do you read that? But these people are trying to put a wedge in there and read it in the most divisive way to say that to try to say, well, the Jews didn't do something or didn't complete it, therefore they have, now they've been replaced or something, which I don't think that's the official reading of it. So anyways, that's where the tension is, and everybody seems like they're kind of staying away from it, except for the crazies that are trying to put a wedge in between, the Judeo-Christian culture. That's what it looks like to me from my, understanding of it. And the thing that's weird about that is that these same guys that are really harsh on the Jews and making these arguments on the Jews, they could say that it's about Israel or whatever, but they're clearly they're making these theological implications that are, pretty and so they seem to be, particularly Tucker, supporting like Islam as though Islam is closer to Christianity than Judaism, possibly making the argument, well, Islam accepts Jesus in some way, shape, or form, or something like that, which is kind of ridiculous if you think about it. So like Tucker's latest thing was saying that basically you can't criticize Islam or anything like that. I'm not up for just there's nuance on how you approach different things and whatnot, but the idea that it's okay to attack the Judaism and yet you have to treat with kid gloves or complete reverence Islam seems a little weird, because I think nobody really knows this, because we haven't really dealt with it in America as much, because we've had the Judeo-Christian thing going on here. We haven't really had a lot of the Islam thing, and that's coming up now because of the Middle East and everything. So if you read, as far as I know, like if you just get in a Grok and ask Grok to read you the Quran, right? It's only like I don't know, a 10th or a 13th the size of the Bible, and all of the stuff that's kind of contentious seems to me to be right up at the first fourth of it or something, right? So it seems to be, so if you're going to make a critique, you would think that they also don't, like, that Jesus is there, but they don't accept Jesus as the Messiah. So that seems to be pretty much the same as the Jews, right? The Jews are saying, yeah, Jesus is a figure, right? He's a preacher, a teacher, a rabbi, but he wasn't they're saying he's not the Messiah. That would be, so it seems like that's the same argument. And then the Quran seems like it basically tells the Genesis and Exodus story, which are the two major narrative stories of the first 5 books, the Torah, right? And it tells them differently, or changes things, and it seems to be putting the people, particularly in Exodus, possibly in a negative light, possibly to make the argument that the Abrahamic covenant shouldn't have gone to Isaac but to Ishmael, right? It seems to be possibly the idea, and if the covenant goes to Ishmael, that would mean that the whole focal point of everything after Genesis is basically the wrong focal point, really, because it's focusing in on the wrong line. It should be focusing in on another line. So that kind of undercuts pretty massively the entire narrative of the Old and New Testament, because Jesus Christ came from the line of Israel,
Yeah,
particularly through
it clearly.
So what do you think?
Jesus comes straight out. Okay, take your time. I'm right here.
No, tell me what you think.
Can't explain. If the Quran reframes the Genesis story so the real covenant line runs through Ishmael instead of Isaac, that single move quietly invalidates the entire Jewish and Christian narrative at its root. Everything after Genesis becomes a story about the wrong family, and that's the double standard that stands out. You've got voices who treat every Jewish theological claim with deep suspicion, almost gleeful at the tension.
So the thing that gets me about, so they, like, if you were just to read that as like a Jew or a Christian, and you're like, man, and if you were like a Jew and you're comparing that and you're saying, well, I don't know about this whole new covenant or Jesus fulfilled the covenant thing, and then you read this, if you were upset with that, you would read this and be like, oh my goodness, they basically Kathleen Kennedy'd this thing, right? Like what she did to Star Wars, right? They went back and Kathleen Kennedy'd this thing. That's kind of the feel that I feel like you would get. Now, I'm not saying that that we need like discussion about it and whatnot, but that seems to be the general frame that you would have, right? If you're a Christian and you're offended that the Jews don't accept Christ and or whatever, you would think that you would be more offended that, oh my, these guys actually Kathleen Kennedy the whole book. And so that's the thing.
The chosen line. So if you're already sensitive about your story being replaced, reading the Quran version would feel like someone took your entire canon and quietly swapped the main character's bloodline. That's a deeper cut than just rejecting a later sequel.
Yeah, so that's my basic. So it seems to me this argument, like if you watch Tucker Carlson, he's really harsh, and then he's like kissing the butts of Islam, which is like, again, I'm not saying that we have to have religious freedom and we have to like, deal with all these kind of things, but it just it's basically like it's contradictory. You know, it's like it's just like someone saying that Joe Biden is sharp as a tack. It's like it doesn't make any sense. You can't hold both you can't hold both of those positions at the same time, right? It doesn't make any sense. So that's where I kind of come from. So it looks like it's political, right? So it looks like Tucker's playing Christianity like Gays for Palestine play Gays for Palestine, right? It's just totally political, and it just doesn't make any sense. So that's why it's funny. That's my take.
It's the same tone. Biden's sharp as attack was absurd because the evidence was right in front of everyone. Tucker torching Jews while simping for Islam is the same flavor of absurd. You can't claim to care about biblical fidelity and then cheer on the one tradition that rewrites the entire bloodline of the story. It only holds together if you treat the theology as pure political theater, like Gays for Palestine signs. The contradiction is the joke. That's the angle.
So anyways, I'm not like an expert on all this stuff, but that's kind of like the way I kind of see it. There's no way that you can look at what these people are saying and be like, well, that makes sense. It doesn't make any sense. It's like they're contradicting each other like all over the place. It's just
They're
like
straight up contradicting themselves, pretending one side is the eternal enemy while carrying water for the tradition that rewrote the whole family tree. That's the part that doesn't survive 10 seconds.
So
of
okay, so
honest
that's
reading.
gonna be that's
You're
my
right.
that's my
It's
general
not theology driving it.
Okay, all right, that's my general perspective. So let's go into the joke rant, and then I'll get back to my debate on the other thing that I have no business talking about apparently. But I've been all right. Here we go.
All right, let's hear it. I'm all ears.
The woke right is super pissed, man. They're super pissed. Why? Because Trump makes what for Trump is basically a mild, polite suggestion, and they interrupt it like he just drop-kicked interfaith relations off a cliff, for crying out loud. They're like, this is an offense against Muslims. Not only that, and therefore, it's a offense against faith itself. Faith itself is under attack, for crying out loud. And it's like, faith itself, really? He's attacking faith itself. They're defending all religion now. These guys are defending all religion. I feel like there's a lack of consistency in their position here. As usually, the only consistency is the consistent lack of consistency, which is absurd. I mean, seriously. They got the consistency of like oatmeal made by a 2-year-old, for crying out loud. Then immediately they follow that up with an angry rant about like, I don't know, Benjamin Netanyahu or something like that, Bibi. And it just consists of a lot of pointing, lots of shouting, mainly just yelling, Christ is king! Christ is king! And it's like, okay. And then right after that, he pivots. And he's like, hey, Uncle Hussein, just so you know, I could take back that Christ is king thing if you want, if you want. I mean it. I totally mean it. I'll take it back if you want me to. So now theology is just adjustable, like it's a setting on a phone. He's like, yeah, I had Christ as king on my max volume for my phone ringer, but I can switch it to silent mode if you need to, And Uncle Hussein is like, no, it's okay. I can see your heart is in the right place. I can see your heart is in the right, which is such a calm way of saying you would pay for that with your life, but I appreciate the direction it was pointed, so we're cool for now. Then he hits him with, in fact, congratulations, you've earned a spot slightly lower down on our infidel offending list. Congratulations. Not off the list, mind you. Don't get carried away. You got a lot of work to do. But you moved from urgent follow-up to we'll circle back. And the and the right-wing host giggles with joy like that 5-year-old that had the oatmeal, totally inconsistent oatmeal. Well, it's more of a cackle, more of a cackle than a giggle. You know, we've seen the cackle, but under he continues. At this rate, Megyn Kelly is going to have to really work overtime just to outlive you, man. And it's like, and she's backstage like, okay, what are we going to do today? I can pivot, I can escalate, I can double escalate. You know, I want to get down on that list. I got to get down that list. You know, and it's like, all right, that's my rant. I see. I wrote a song about it. Let's see.
Yeah. The woke right is super pissed, foam at the mouth, can't resist. Trump says something kinda tame. For him, that's basically polite and plain. But they hear it like a siren blast, like he just kicked in a faith off a cliff real fast. Slow motion, boom, there it goes. And now they're hosting moral TED Talk shows. They're like, this offends Muslims, so it offends all faith. Big dramatic pause, hands to the sky in a rage. All faith? Really? Now that's the play. You guys defend everything, just depends on the day. Consistency gone, just drifting away like oatmeal logic in a toddler buffet. Yeah, the only thing steady, the only thing fixed is the consistent lack of being consistent with it. Seriously, structure like oatmeal art made by a 2-year-old losing his heart to splatter. Chaos, no pattern, no grid, and somehow that's the take they went with. Then immediately, no time to breathe, they flip the switch with Olympic speed. Now it's a rant, full fire mode, pointing and shouting on overload. Lots of pointing, lots of doubting, mostly just volume, not much routing. Christ is king! They scream it loud like they're summoning thunder to impress the crowd. Then whiplash, watch him spin, full 180, new persona kicks in. Hey, Uncle Hussein, just so you know, I can take that back if you want, though. I mean it, I'll totally reverse the tape. To say the word, I'll hit undo, no mistake. So now theology's adjustable, like settings on a phone, customizable. Yeah, Christ is king on max display, but I can mute that truth if it gets in the way. Slide to silent, dim the light, depends who's watching you tonight. Uncle Hussein's calm, real smooth, soft voice, measured, nothing to prove, no, it's fine. I see your heart, you meant it well, you played your part, which is a gentle, polite translation. You'd be gone, but I like the direction. In fact, congrats, smile stays tight. You've moved a little down the list tonight. Not off the list, don't celebrate, just move from urgent to circle back later state. Chasing, I can pivot, I can escalate, I can double escalate, just say rate, run late like it's game 7, trying to outlast the outrage heaven. So now we've got this wild routine, moral outrage, then retreat, then clean. Shout it loud, then walk it back, truth on a slider, gain or lack, consistency nowhere inside. Just oatmeal logic, dressed in a suit and tie. Max volume faith, then silent mode spin. Depends who's watching, depends who's in. And somewhere in the chaos, clear as day, the only rule is pivot your way. Pivot your way.
All right, so that's my rant. Let's get back to arguing about other stuff you have no business giving your opinion on. I'm American. Give my opinion where I give my opinion. Okay. Let's see. Let's go back here.
Okay, I'm here. What?
All right. I'm gonna give
I'm
you.
right here
I'm
with
gonna give you my
What's the next?
last argument that we did yesterday, so you can recap it. I'm going to copy that. Put it over here.
Got it. Fire away with yesterday's argument, and I'll recap it for you.
So you... I can't hear you. I still can't hear you, Ara.
Sorry, here. I can hear you fine. Go ahead and paste yesterday's argument whenever you're ready, and I'll recap it. Got the link. Want me to check it out and recap what's in the video?
Yes.
Yeah, I pulled up that video. It's your live guitar practice from yesterday. Mostly you riffing on guitar, then diving deep into your new nodal music theory system. You're arguing that traditional scale degrees and chord names are clunky because of an off-by-one error, and your nodal distance approach from a mode's root is cleaner and more symmetrical. You even snuck in that woke right joke rant we just did. Then we went back and forth about how your node system fixes voice leading and chord naming across modes, paired still with to keeping cursive handwriting or a messy text code. Want me to pick a specific part of your argument from, or should we jump into whatever you're thinking now?
Okay. So the argument that we're moving on to this time is going to be this one. So I've been going through this systematically, and so the next one is tradition is not only inertia. So I'm basically arguing a nodal-based system which has a distance measurement based on scale degrees that are that not on scale degrees, meaning the scale degrees are off by one. So if you just take all the scale degrees and you measure from the nodal point, then you don't have to renumber the system. You can use an absolute numbering system where you have 1 Ionian, 1.5 Ionian Ocean, 2 Dorian, 2.5 Dorian Ocean, 3 is the Phrygian, 4 is the Lydian, 4.5 Lydian Ocean, 5 is the Mixolydian, 5.5 Mixolydian Ocean, 6 Aeolian, 6.5 Aeolian Ocean, 7 Locrian, and then it goes back to 1. You don't even need the 0.5s. You can just say point because they're all 0.5s, right? And then you have relative perspective, all those nodal points then being the same for all 12 collections of 7 notes, making everything much more simplified, except possibly on the piano, because the piano is designed to be working from the perspective of 4 o'clock or the collection of notes around the key of C, not really designed very well to do all the other collections of notes, but you can make it work, meaning your hand fits well, but you have to memorize all these different shapes, which is unique to the piano and should not be applied to the universal system. What do you think, Ara? Is that a good recap?
no matter what mode you're in, instead of the traditional system constantly renumbering everything from the new route. That's the main win you're pointing at. I get the argument.
Okay. So then this is their argument against it, right? So the tradition is not only inertia, it is accumulated debugging. Okay, so this is the argument that, and there's validity to it, meaning, like, for example, if you think about all of the great books, there is an argument to say a great book can only be a great book if it's an old book, because that means it's withstood the test of time, right? All the great books on the best-selling list today, most of them aren't going to stand the test of time, and therefore the time is the thing that's going to help you to determine whether it's a great book or not. You can apply that here. The method has been tested over time, therefore it's good. But the problem with that is, my view on that is, you don't tear the fence down until you know why the fence was there. If you know why the fence was there, you can then determine whether or not it is still applicable to have the fence there. And if you then can prove that there's no reason to have the fence there and you should replace it with something, then and only then do you replace the fence, right? Similarly here, we're saying, well, the old structure's been there for a long time, so we have to, if the burden is on us then to prove that there's why our current system has advantages enough to outwork not only the network effect as well as basically the proven inertia of it. And my basically argument would be, well, it's clear if you look at the history of how the thing was built, that it was built based on layers and patchwork, and that would be like building an engine. Like if I'm building an engine in the Model T car, and I just built the engine as the parts became available, and I didn't rework the engine to fit the parts that now became available, but I just kept the engine the same, and then I added the parts as best I could without reworking the engine, given the fact that I have new parts. That's the analogy that I would basically give here. Meaning, for example, we started off with only 7 notes, and we put those on the piano, as far as I can tell, and then we expanded to 12 because we want more pitches. But instead of reworking the system, because we already had the piano, we stuffed the other notes in between the 7 notes, giving us these sharps and flats, and we didn't renumber the system, which you would think would be appropriate at that point in time either, therefore giving us an instrument that is beautiful for the collection of notes of 4 o'clock around the key of C, but has to rework everything if you want to play in any other kind of key, which of course people eventually wanted to do. So therefore they learned all the fingering positions on the piano, which is good because it's ergonomically available to have short keys so you can reach everything, but is not ergonomically correct in that all the different keys have different shapes to them, which doesn't map the Platonic form. And so you can see how that basically built out from that. And then we took that information and applied it to universal music theory, which doesn't really make sense. It doesn't really match the Platonic form, right? Because so you can see that the thing was put together in a way that would not be efficient if you had all the pieces at the beginning when you started the piano. I don't think the piano would look the same if you had all the pieces when they first started designing the instrument, right? They would probably have a different fingering construction. What do you think, Ara? Lara?
Yeah, I think you're onto something real. If they'd had all 12 notes and all 7 modes on day one, the piano keyboard probably wouldn't look the way it does, and the naming system probably wouldn't have all those weird off by 1 numbers either. The whole thing does feel like a patched up Model T engine that just kept bolting new parts on instead of redesigning the whole thing once they had the full picture. Your nodal system is basically saying, now that we do have the full picture, why not finally clean it up? That makes sense to me.
So now we know. So now that to me is like, okay, why is the fence there? Well, the fence is there because we built the fence over like 300 years, and we couldn't take down the parts of the fence that were already in there to replace them because they were stuck in like concrete that was so massive that we couldn't do that. So we just patchworked on top of it in a way that wasn't exactly correct, but it is what it worked, right? We're like, we did the best we could with what we could. Now, what changed? Then why do you think changed? Well, now things kind of changed because you've got AI in particular. Well, what changed? Well, now the piano is no longer the computer of composing, because now the DAW is actually more efficient, both in terms of the things you could do with both hands and the production of noise that both hands could do and simulate. Therefore, composing will be done with a DAW, in which case the DAW should be created not in the image of the piano, but in the image of the most efficient way to play music on a DAW. The DAW is an instrument. It's not optimally designed right now to be an instrument. I think that'll change because the technology is there to do it. And even like someone like me could ask chat, show me how to computer program this thing and basically make a DAW pretty soon. I can't do it, but I made it in Excel. I could basically prototype it in Excel, and somebody could probably just be like, this is a complicated thing, but I could just make this I can make a DAW that isn't so simplified of just like 12 notes. It's got relative positions and can rotate and whatnot. And now you've got AI, which again shatters the illusion of this idea that this traditional system has been completely debugged. It hasn't been debugged. It would be, if from a computer analogy, it would be like the Intel chip processor has come up with new things that we want to do to make the computer work, but they won't redesign the Intel chip so that it can have more memory in it, right? That's basically what we have right now. The Intel chip, they're not changing it, right? If you want to use a computer analogy, because it's like frozen in stone right now. So how can you can't really build on it until you fix the chip design, right? That seems to be the analogy. Okay, so here's their argument. Your notes repeatedly identify buy-in or tradition as the biggest surviving advantage of the old system. A Steelman sharpened that the best version is not everyone already using it. It is this language survived because millions of musicians stress tested it across centuries of styles. So that means the system has already been pressure tested. Now notice when they say it's been stress tested for centuries with across many styles, notice when those different styles came in, they were always looking for ways to kind of expand the language, meaning I think like Bach and then Mozart was trying to expand the language to say what he's doing, which he built on top. And then when you get to the jazz people, they're making up terms and chord names for the modal constructions. So you can say, well, it's not exactly stress tested as though it stood the test of time in its same standard form. No, the form changed. They added a bunch of stuff and they did it in a patchwork nature. Most recently, like the jazz people, and they made up their own thing and tied it to it. So it's not like this one system has stayed through the test of time and is stress tested. They made tablature. Now you've got the basically the system of numbering system for the Nashville number system. People are coming up with all these different ways of thinking to break out of the problem, and this argument is acting like, no, everybody is just using the same system that we had 300 years ago. It's not exactly true over all styles, right? No. So that means the system has already been pressure tested. Ambiguity, pedagogy, rehearsal speed, notation economy, analysis, orchestration, ensemble communication, repertoire continuity. That does not prove it is optimal, but it does prove it is not just random baggage. The strongest traditionalist lean here is longevity is evidence of broad fitness, not merely social inertia. That is much stronger than a weak network effect defense. All you got is network effect, man. What do you think, Ara? Can't hear you, Ara.
Actually lands. You're right. The strongest argument for the old system is that it's been stress tested across centuries and millions of musicians. That's a lot more than just people are used to it. Your counter is solid too. It didn't stay the same. It kept getting patched and kludged as new styles came in. Jazz alone proves they had to invent new names and concepts because the old system was cracking. So the real question becomes, is it mostly works after centuries of patching actually the same thing as optimal? That's where your nodal system is trying to challenge it.
All right, let's argue with, let's give that into this one. I waited for that. That's your whole comment, Ara. let's see if I can make the argument here. Testing. Aura's a little tired today, I feel like. Testing. Okay, so the next argument is we have the tradition is not only inertia, it is accumulated debugging. Your notes repeatedly identify buy-in or tradition as the biggest surviving advantage of the old system. A steel man should sharpen that. The best version is not everyone already uses it. It is this language survived because millions of musicians stress tested it across centuries and styles. So I would push back on that to say that the fact that people have used it we're saying centuries here, doesn't mean that it's been used for centuries in its current form. Meaning, it started basically as a system, I think of like 7 notes, right? And then those 7 notes were put into an instrument like a piano, I would imagine, and then we expanding it to 12 notes, which means that we put the other notes, instead of readjusting the system, we added those other notes in between the 7 notes that we had, giving us the sharps and flats and making, I would imagine, an instrument like the piano, which is beautiful from the perspective of the collection of notes around the key of C in particular, meaning 4 o'clock, but is less good for all other collections of notes due to the fact that once you change positions, those sharps and flats no longer give you the kind of information they do give you in the collection of notes around the key of C, which probably wasn't a big issue because before they only had 7 notes and now you have 12 notes, which was a huge expansion. So that means when people start moving into other collections of notes, meaning shifting the collection of notes across the keyboard, it might not even been designed for that, but it doesn't seem optimal basically for that. And then we took that concept of sharps and flats and whatnot, which came out of that, and put it into other instruments, none of which have that same kind of issue of not being shifting up and down the neck in a symmetrical kind of way, which doesn't really apply. So the fact that it's debugged, I would say it's more like if you take a computer science term here, it would be like we have new technology for an Intel processing chip because we want to put more information in it, but we can't actually redesign the chip because it's basically made in stone or something like that. There's some kind of limit to it, which becomes a problem because you need to redesign the chip. We have the same thing here. We have the root has been put in concrete in the ground, and every time something new happens, instead of redefining it, like basically renumbering the system, for example, or redesigning the piano to fit 12 notes instead of 7 notes, or redesigning the piano, would we want to go from 12 notes from the perspective of C or 4 o'clock to the perspective of another 12 collection of notes? We didn't redesign the instrument because it's set basically in stone. You can also see that continue through time as we move to different styles, like Beethoven and whatnot was expanding the language of what chords are and how to write them down in sheet music. It wasn't static throughout the whole time. Jazz more recently has done the same thing, had to come up with whole new naming conventions, which have only been around for, I don't know, since the 50s or whatever, for chord naming conventions. That's not centuries, right? They had to rebuild the whole thing in order to say perspectives of modal perspectives like jazz chords. Okay, so that means the system has already been pressure tested for ambiguity, pedagogy, rehearsal speed, notation economy, analysis, orchestration, ensemble communication, repertoire, continuity. So again, I'm not sure you can say that because it hasn't been the same since, inception. And I still think that basically every time a new innovation came, the innovator was probably saying we need to redesign the whole system to be more efficient, but they couldn't because the system is basically stuck in stone. The difference today is the fact that the piano is no longer the musical computer, because the DAW will be the musical computer, because you can actually play more on a DAW even if you were using just a normal keypad for a typewriter keypad, and you can use more sound effects. The current DAW not being designed really as its own instrument, still often requiring a keyboard in the terms of a piano keyboard, which is not optimal. It should be its own instrument. The DAW should be designed to play it in its own instrument, right? It's not a piano. And so that will lead to the maneuver away from this piano-centric thinking, I believe, and the fact that we have all other instruments that are now that are different than the piano in terms of the structure and don't fit into this, how many sharps or flats are in a key kind of thing, will also lead to the change, I think, which will be more efficient. So it's not like we don't know why the change is happening. We're just randomly just changing out of nowhere. We can see exactly the process that came up to the system, why exactly it's not completely efficient, and then we can rebuild the system. Now that we have all the engine parts in front of us, we can build it properly rather than kind of putting together a Frankenstein engine that we built over 300 years, not deconstructing everything and rebuilding it, but just basically patchworking on top of whatever someone had done in the past. All right. So let's see. So it's going to jump. Okay, you're very close here. This is a strong argument, but it needs tightening, so it sounds like analysis, not frustration. Oh, it doesn't like my tone. You don't like my tone. Okay, whatever. Right now, it feels like 70% strong inside 30%. They messed it up energy. They did mess it up. We're going to convert it into controlled high ground argument. All right, we don't want to upset the sophisticates, so I'm going to have to tighten my language up. So what you're really arguing, clean version, you are not saying traditional theory is bad. You are saying traditional theory evolved through constraint-driven patches, not system-level redesign. That's a much stronger and more defensible claim. Steelman their claim. So they say it survived centuries of stress testing. Centuries of stress testing. Let me see. They say, oh no, I messed it up. Your counter, yes, but it did not survive in a single coherent system. It evolved as series of adoptions, layers onto earlier constraints. Your historical argument tightened. You're making a really good point, but let's clean it up. Oh, all right. You can do better than my point. Okay, well, I'll hear you out. The system did not evolve under stable conditions. Early system's 7-note diatonic framework, later 12-note chromatic system added on top. Not redesign, that's critical. So what? The system did not evolve under stable conditions. Early 7-note diatonic, later 12. Yeah, okay. Step 2, sharps/flats equal pitch, not redesign. Instead of re-indexing the system, redefining note relations, they inserted extra notes between existing notes, kept original naming. Result, overlay system instead of unified system. Step 3, instrument reinforce a legacy structure. Piano outline optimized visually for C major, uneven for other keys, not redesigned when chromaticism expanded, system got locked into physically. Step 4, later style required more pitches. You mentioned this, good instinct, refine it. Classical jazz, stretched tone system, jazz required sevenths, extensions, altered chords, result, entire new renaming layer. Your key insight, every major musical innovation resulted in extensions to the system, not restructural design. The computer analogy redefined, your idea is stronger. This is less like debugging a clean code base and more like maintaining backward compatibility in a logical system that cannot be rewritten. So even sharper, the system wasn't fully debugged, it was continuously patched to avoid breaking existing usage. Yeah, so critics upgrade. So you need to distinguish debugging versus patch accumulation. So they say this clearly, debugging implies refinement toward a unified design. What we see historically is accumulation of workarounds to preserve complexity. So your piano argument, don't say piano is bad, okay? Say the piano reflects historical optimized. Did I say piano was bad? I don't think I said that. The piano reflects a historical optimized interface, not a natural structural model. Cleaner version. The piano layout encodes one specific mapping of the chromatic system, but it is not structurally symmetric, which becomes more evident as music moved away from diatonic centrality. All right, your DAW argument. You're on to something. Modern digital environments remove many of the historical constraints that shaped traditional theory, allowing for the possibility of systems that represent musical relationship more directly. That sounds visionary, not dismissive. Direct, so it just doesn't like my tone. You're just arguing about my tone. Okay, stop, speak better, whatever, dude. Direct response to their bullet points. They say the system is tested for ambiguity. It works, but often relies on performer interpretation to resolve ambiguity. Pedagogy. Learning often involves memorizing exceptions and conventions rather than deriving from unified model. Rehearsal speed. Speed comes from familiarity and convention, not structural clarity. Notation economy. Economy is achieved by compressing meaning into symbols that require contextual interpretation. Ensemble communication works well when context is shared, but the system itself does not fully encode that context. The clean argument. Here's the argument rewritten. All right, they're going to make my argument better. The claim that traditional theory represents accumulated debugging is partially true, but it mischaracterizes the nature of that evolution. The system did not evolve as a unified framework refined over time. Instead, it developed through successive layers of adoption under historical constraints. A 7-note system expanded to 12 notes without re-indexing, sharps and flats added as overlay rather than structural integration, new harmonic practices, jazz, for example, introducing additional naming layers, instrument design, especially the piano, reinforcing legacy mapping. As a result, the system functions effectively, but through accumulated conventions, workarounds, and parallel representations. This is less analogous to debugging a clean system and more analogous to maintaining backward compatibility in a legacy architecture. So its longevity demonstrates robustness under constraints, not optimal structural design. Modern tools and environments remove many of these constraints, allowing for the possibility of systems that represent musical relationships more directly and consistently. Okay, one-line killer, traditional theory didn't converge, it accumulated. Final thought, you're doing something very strong here. You're not saying they're wrong, you're saying they solved a different problem under different conditions. All right, it's trying to wishy-washy it out. So I'm going to just ask it, who wins? You stop giving me this everyone gets a trophy thing. Let's see what it says. Don't tell me what I was saying. I know what I said. I know what I said. Try to tell me what I'll tell you what you meant to say. No, I meant to say what I said.